In this lecture, we will continue to build our level and add a feature to the tilting bridge we've been making. You'll learn how to reroute the connection wires and use the finished execution pin of the timeline. So let's begin. Please open the wall to a bridge blueprint. If you added something outside of the curriculum, please unhook it and start from this point. We are particularly interested in this finished execution pin of the timeline. As you might have guessed, the finished pin fires off once after the timeline is depleted. It can be used to add further logic to the game and will be very useful in many case scenarios. But before we begin working on the finished execution pin of the timeline, let's make some tweaks to the level. Please open your level viewport. First, I'd like to add a material to this separated floor tile. The starter content already has a material that would look good to signal that this floor tile is the end goal for our player. Make sure the separated floor tile is selected. Then expand its material slot. Search for mirror plane material and select it. Now it certainly looks different. From now on, we'll use this tile as sort of a finish line for our players. Now, for the purposes of this lecture, let's move it further away. I think this is far enough. So I was thinking of adding a function to our wall to bridge blueprint. After it finishes tilting, I'd like it to hover over to this finish line of ours. What do you think? Let's give it a try. Open the wall to bridge blueprint. By the way, if for whatever reason your tab of the wall to bridge blueprint isn't open, you can always open it again like this. First, select the blueprint you'd like to open in the level viewport. Then you can click here. Sometimes it's much faster to open a blueprint like this instead of searching for it in the content browser. Now, I'd like to create another timeline that executes only after the execution of the first timeline is depleted. To do so, I will drag from the finished execution pin of the first timeline and release it somewhere here. Then I will search for timeline and click on Add Timeline. I will simply call this timeline hover. Now double-click on the hover timeline to open it. Add a float track. I think the meaningful name for this track would be Hover Position Alpha. As you might have guessed, we will use the linear interpolation method to move the bridge to our desired location. First, we will adjust the length of the timeline. I think 6 seconds will be just right. Okay, you know the drill. We have to make 2 keyframes in this timeline. The starting point should be at 0 with the value of 0. The endpoint keyframe should be on 6 seconds with a value of 1. This is how your timeline should look like. In the future, if you're working with linear interpolation, the values of the keyframes in your timeline should be from 0 to 1. No more, no less. Okay, now we can return to the event graph. So, our goal in this lecture is to move the bridge after it finished execution of the first timeline where it tilts. Basically, we need to set new world location of the wall static mesh component. First, let's drag it out and place it somewhere in this location. Then I will drag from the output pin of the wall static mesh component reference and search for set world location. Now I will drag from the input pin new location of this node. I will release it here and search for lerp. Now it's time to hook up everything. Nice. Before we proceed, we need the starting point and the ending point locations of the bridge. Let's return to the level viewport. The first timeline will tilt the bridge. Let's mimic what it does here in the level viewport. I believe the end result of the first timeline looks like this. Now we need the location transform of this bridge. We need to input these values into the A pin of the linear interpolation to mark its starting point. Simply copy and paste the values. Okay, we have a starting point. Now we need to discover the endpoint. This looks just about right. Now I will copy the location values again, but this time I will input the values in the B pin of the linear interpolation. I'm using keyboard shortcut Control and C to copy and Control and V to paste. Okay, that's just about it. But before we test out new timeline, we need to return the wall to bridge blueprint to where it was in the beginning. I think I forgot to compile the blueprint. Let's quickly compile it. Testing time. Let's play our game. According to the logic of our blueprint, the first timeline will tilt the wall and turn it into a bridge. It certainly works. Now let's see if it hovers over to our finish line. It does. Awesome. Now you know how to add timelines and execute them properly. If you think about it, solely the knowledge you acquired from this course is already enough to build a small mobile game. But we are going to learn so much more. What we did today can be done in so many different methods. For instance, we were copying and pasting the values for our interpolation node. We could have stored at least the starting point value of the wall to bridge blueprint by promoting its location as a variable, and then inserting this variable into the A pin of the linear interpolation. That's one example. As we progress through this course, I will try to use various methods of achieving the same goal, so that you are able to decide for yourself which method is better. Before we end this lecture, I'd like to quickly teach you how to tidy up the connection wires in the blueprint editor graph. Please return to the wall to bridge blueprint. Now I will double-click left mouse button to create a reroute pin. Note you need to double-click on the connection wire. Then I will drag it over here, so it doesn't pierce through other node. A second reroute pin can be created at this spot. Now everything looks tidy. That's how it should look if you don't want to waste time on searching starting point and the ending point of the connection wires. Please don't make a spaghetti out of your graph editor. Your assignment for today will be to hover the blueprint to another location. For instance, you can place the finish somewhere higher and make your bridge hover to its location. Please don't proceed with this course until you've accomplished this assignment. It's very important to be able to do it without my help. I'm sure you'll manage. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next lecture.